Las Vegas is experiencing an unprecedented economic crisis, and the root cause traces directly back to inflammatory rhetoric from the highest levels of American government. The suggestion that Canada could become America's 51st state, coupled with dismissive references to Canadian leadership, has triggered a massive backlash that's now crippling one of America's most tourism-dependent cities. Canadian travel to the United States has plummeted to historic lows, with visitors choosing to stay home rather than support an economy whose leaders they view as hostile to their nation. The city that never sleeps is watching its economic foundation crumble, one canceled reservation at a time. So what exactly triggered this dramatic shift? And why has Las Vegas become ground zero for the fallout from these diplomatic disasters? To understand the full scope of this economic catastrophe, we need to examine both the numbers and the human stories behind them, and paint a devastating picture. Mayor Shelley Berkeley didn't mince words when she described the situation facing her city. Canadian tourism to Las Vegas has gone from a faucet to a drip, she told reporters during a recent press conference. This isn't political hyperbole or exaggeration. It's an economic emergency that threatens the livelihoods of thousands of workers and businesses. The city welcomed just under 3.1 million tourists in June 2025, marking an 11% drop compared to the same month in 2024. International visitor numbers fell by 13%, while hotel occupancy rates declined by approximately 15%. These aren't minor fluctuations or seasonal adjustments. They represent a fundamental shift in how America's northern neighbors view travel to the United States. The airline industry data reveals an even more catastrophic decline. Air Canada passenger numbers plummeted 33% in June compared to the previous year, while WestJet saw a 31% drop in traffic. But perhaps most shocking was Flair Airlines, which reported a staggering 62% decline in passengers. Consider that for a moment, nearly 2/3 of passengers from a major Canadian carrier simply stopped flying to Las Vegas. This isn't a temporary adjustment, it's a wholesale rejection of American tourism by one of the country's most reliable visitor markets. Canadians weren't just Las Vegas's largest international visitor group, they were absolutely essential to the city's economic ecosystem. Nearly 1.5 million Canadians visited Vegas in 2024 alone, making them Nevada's largest international market by a significant margin. Canadian tourists spent $20.5 billion in the United States in 2024, with 20.4 million Canadians visiting the country overall. Las Vegas captured a significant portion of that spending, particularly during hockey season when Canadian teams played the Golden Knights. Now, that crucial revenue stream is evaporating at an alarming rate. The impact extends far beyond simple tourism statistics. Major gaming companies have acknowledged the crisis during recent earnings calls with investors. Caesars Entertainment CEO Tom Reeg said Canadian visitors represented a significant piece of a 27,000 room night decline in the second quarter, even though Canadians comprise only 3 or 4% of the total pie. MGM Resorts CEO Bill Hornbuckle similarly highlighted the challenges posed by reduced international visitation, noting that the decline began around the time trade tensions escalated between the two nations. But what's driving this unprecedented boycott movement? The answer lies in inflammatory rhetoric and aggressive trade policies that have fundamentally damaged the relationship between these longtime allies. Travel agents in Canada report that politics plays a decisive role, with many Canadians staying away from the United States due to trade tensions and what they perceive as disrespectful treatment of their country and its sovereignty. Wendy Hart, who books trips from Windsor, Ontario, said the reason was politics for sure. She speculated it was a point of national pride that people were staying away from the U.S. during this period of heightened tensions. The situation became particularly acute after comments about making Canada the 51st state and referring to Canadian leadership in dismissive terms. These weren't just diplomatic gaffes or misunderstandings, they were perceived as fundamental disrespect toward Canadian sovereignty and national identity.
Containers ended up scattered in the water, some with the contents spilling out. They fell from a vessel named the Mississippi shortly before 9 yesterday morning. No one was hurt, but U.S. Coast Guard officials say the cargo vessel listed to one side, damaging a clean air barge connected to the ship. Checking in with Faisal Carmeli, portfolio manager of the Popwich Carmeli Advisory Group. How's the day setting up, Faisal?
Slight positive in pre-market trading on both sides of the border. All attention is on the next 30 minutes when we find out what the producer price index, this is the inflation number for businesses that might get passed down to customers, is coming out. On top of that, we had some terrible numbers coming out of the U.S. unemployment numbers. So all the attention on the Federal Reserve coming up in the next week or so. Will they cut rates? The chance there is going to be 1/4%, but will they do more throughout the year? Some are saying as many as 3/4% more for the rest of the year. That's going to be a very...
A Canadian pollster found that 65% of Canadians believe the trade dispute has permanently damaged the American-Canadian relationship. Another survey revealed that 91% of Canadians want their country to rely less on the United States moving forward.
For a lot more drastic action, including calls for referendum on Alberta's independence. That drew some cheers from parts of the crowd. While separatism wasn't the dominant theme of the evening, it was certainly the most polarizing. Premier Smith acknowledged the frustrations, saying that the panels are meant to gauge what's driving that sentiment. The discussion covered 6 key areas, including immigration, equalization, provincial policing, and Alberta's role within Confederation. One of the most talked about issues was whether the province should withdraw from the Canadian pension plan.
They've gone from $150 million in management expenses to $6 billion, and they're getting worse results now with their active management than they did under the passive management. So I think we just have to be realistic and understand that it has changed over time, and that's why we have to ask if Albertans are getting the best value for it, and we'll see if people want to go for a vote on it.
I think that they're listening. You know, it's a matter of, this is step one. What happens after they listen, and do they hear and are able to implement it into all these other areas?
In Jefferson, Airdrie will hold the next Alberta Next panel on Monday, followed by one in Calgary later this month.
Okay, thanks, Mason. Well, the province aims to transition Albertans currently receiving Alberta Income for the Severely Handicapped Benefits, or AISH, to a new program, but advocates are warning it will leave people with less money and greater hardship. Here's Kevin Green.
The trade war has created a perfect storm of economic and political resentment between the two nations. There's a 10% blanket tariff on most international imports, a 25% tariff on certain Canadian and Mexican goods, and these policies have contributed to rising costs and economic uncertainty on both sides of the border. Canadian politicians have actively supported the boycott movement, with leadership calling on Canadians to choose Canadian products and services, rather than American ones wherever possible. Foreign Minister Melanie Joly even suggested that Canadians cancel or avoid travel to the United States during this period. The boycott's effectiveness has been remarkable by any measure. An Angus Reid survey found that 48% of respondents had already or were seriously likely to cancel or delay plans to travel to the United States. In Quebec alone, of the 20% of residents who had plans to travel to the U.S. in 2025, 45% had either already canceled or intended to cancel their trip. This represents an estimated $3 billion Canadian economic loss for the United States. Bookings for leisure travel to the U.S. by flight were 40% lower in February 2025 than February 2024. The desperation in Las Vegas has become increasingly palpable. Mayor Berkeley has made multiple public pleas for Canadians to return to the city. We need you and we miss you, she said directly to Canadian audiences during a recent media appearance. But these appeals ring hollow when the fundamental issues driving the boycott remain unaddressed. The mayor has tried to distance Las Vegas from federal politics, emphasizing that the city loves its Canadian visitors and has always been a favorite destination for neighbors to the north. However, many Canadians are no longer making distinctions between federal and local policies when choosing their travel destinations. The crisis has forced Las Vegas to confront uncomfortable realities about its tourism-dependent economic model. The city's economy generates $85.2 billion in total economic impact in southern Nevada, heavily dependent on international visitors for its continued prosperity. Las Vegas visitor volumes have declined each month so far in 2025, with the first 6 months showing a 7.3% decrease compared to the same period in 2024. On AAA's annual Top 10 list of Labor Day destinations, Las Vegas slipped to the last spot from number 6 in 2024. other American destinations are feeling similar effects from the Canadian boycott. The travel forecasting company Tourism Economics, which in December 2024 anticipated the U.S. would have nearly 9% more international arrivals this year, revised its annual outlook to predict a 9.4% drop instead. Some of the steepest declines are expected from Canada, the company said in its revised forecast. This mirrors a national trend of international visitors avoiding the United States due to political and economic concerns. Some American officials have attempted damage control with varying degrees of success. California Governor Newsom made efforts to entice Canadians with a video message saying his state is 2,000 miles away from Washington and a world away in mindset. Individual hotels in states like Oregon and Maine have tried recruiting Canadians with discounted stays and free perks, but these piecemeal efforts can't overcome the fundamental problem that has damaged America's reputation as a welcoming destination for international visitors. The human stories behind the statistics are particularly telling. Canadian families who had planned Las Vegas vacations for months are canceling at the last minute, often at significant financial cost. Holly Hjartarson, sitting outside T-Mobile Arena with her husband, said she was this close to canceling a month ago because of travel advisories and concerns about ESI, upholding the American economy during this period. Others describe feeling conflicted about visiting a country whose leadership they view as hostile to their values and interests. The economic ripple effects extend throughout Nevada's entire economy. State Treasurer Zach Conine reported that sales tax revenue fell around 4.5% for the first couple months of 2025. Gaming revenue and room tax receipts are also lagging behind projections. These are backward-looking indicators, meaning they reflect what was happening on the threat of tariffs alone before the full impact of implemented policies became clear. Las Vegas's tourism industry is scrambling to adapt to this new reality. Some resort operators have removed fees and parking charges to make visits more attractive, though most have not followed suit. The city is also dealing with broader challenges, including higher costs for food, hotel rooms, and attractions that keep visitors away regardless of political considerations. Mayor Berkeley has called on business owners to make tourism more affordable, saying people are feeling nickeled and dimed and aren't getting value for their dollar in the current environment. The long-term implications could be severe for the American tourism industry. Canada was the largest source of visitors to the United States in 2024, with more than 20.2 million people crossing the border. If even a fraction of these visitors permanently shift their travel patterns away from the United States, the economic impact will be felt for years to come. The tourism industry's recovery could take much longer than the political tensions that caused the crisis in the first place. What makes this situation particularly frustrating for Las Vegas officials is that they have no control over the federal policies driving the boycott. The city's economy is being held hostage by diplomatic failures and trade wars that local leaders had no part in creating. Local businesses, workers, and communities are paying the price for decisions made in Washington that they had no ability to influence or prevent. The broader implications extend far beyond tourism statistics. This crisis demonstrates how inflammatory rhetoric and aggressive policies toward allies can have immediate, measurable economic consequences. When American leadership insults and threatens the nation's closest allies, there are real costs that impact real people. Las Vegas is just one example of how this diplomatic approach has real consequences for real people.
Roy reports.
Conservative activist Charlie Kirk dead at 31 years old after authorities say he was shot while speaking at Utah Valley University this afternoon. Police say the suspect is still at large. Video shows the moments before Kirk was shot. We're pausing it before the gunfire.
Just one shot straight into Charlie Kirk.
And I watched a fountain of blood come out of the side of his neck like a water fountain.
Panic and chaos in the crowd as people ran for cover.
Anyone could just walk in. It was at probably the worst place in campus because there's so many areas where anyone can just walk in.
Witnesses say Kirk was talking about gun violence when he was shot.
Everyone got down. Everyone was so scared.
Kirk is a massive voice in the conservative movement as the founder and CEO of Turning Point USA, an influential conservative youth organization. He's often sparked heated debates on college campuses across the country. His rhetoric has often been closely aligned with President Trump.
I had a brief conversation with the president over the phone. He sounded quite upset, quite down about this. He told me it's horrific. It's one of the most horrific things I've ever seen.
Both the ATF and FBI are responding. The FBI saying they're closely monitoring the situation and that agents are on the ground there. Yep. Politicians on both sides of the aisle denouncing politically motivated violence.
This is detestable what's happened. Political violence has become all too common in American society, and this is not...
Looking ahead, the situation shows no signs of immediate improvement. The policies driving Canadian resentment remain in place, and attitudes continue to harden on both sides of the border. The shift in Canadian attitudes toward the United States has been described as unprecedented by many observers of the bilateral relationship. Some Canadians with dual citizenship have not only moved back to Canada, but renounced their American citizenship entirely, signaling a deeper, more permanent rupture in the relationship between these longtime allies. The Las Vegas crisis serves as a cautionary tale about the real-world consequences of treating allies with contempt and disrespect. The economic costs are immediate and severe, affecting communities far from the centers of political power. Las Vegas may be begging for Canadians to come back, but until the fundamental issues driving this boycott are addressed, those pleas are likely to fall on deaf ears. The city that built its reputation on welcoming visitors from around the world is learning the hard way that political hostility can quickly transform economic prosperity into economic crisis. The damage to diplomatic relations has translated directly into damaged livelihoods for countless Americans who depend on international tourism for their economic survival.